Well, before we get a view in from our panelists, let's get you the big newsmaker tonight. Infosys founder N.R. Narayan Murthy in conversation with V. Sangvi earlier in the day, where he spoke about just what was the problem the founders had with the board. Here's a 10-minute excerpt before we go to our guests.
Let me start by asking you about the current controversy. It's been suggested that you're unhappy for several reasons with the way in which the Infosys management is currently functioning. Can you tell me what those reasons are?
No, first of all, let me make it very, very clear, Veer, that it is not the management that concerns me. I think we are quite happy with Dr. Vishal Sikka. He's doing a good job. He's a very bright person. However, what concerns some of us, particularly the founders and senior former Infosians, is that there have been certain acts of governance that could have been better.
Okay, give me some examples.
For example, paying the former CFO a 30 months severance pay.
That is, after he left, he got his salary for another 30 months after he'd departed. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah? Which amounted to how much?
23 crores.
23 crores.
All right.
Yeah. What was the argument for doing that?
The chairman said at the AGM that he had some highly confidential competitive information. But anybody who knows our industry can quickly come to the conclusion that there are so many people in the company, senior people, that have such competitive information that in Infosys itself we have had 2 CFOs who left before, and several other senior people who are on the board, senior vice presidents, etc., who had such competitive information, and we didn't pay any one of them. So therefore, it has led to some kind of confusion as to...
Let me put this bluntly. You're going to dance around the subject, but what the market is saying is that guy had the goods on you. He had damaging stuff on Infosys and they had to pay him off.
Well, I hope it is not the case, but we are all judged by our actions. See, in Kannada there is a saying, if you sit under a toddy tree and drink milk, people will think you are drinking toddy. So therefore, it's very, very important for us not only to do the right thing, but also to be seen doing the right thing. I think that is the whole issue.
Before we go further, I have to give you in all fairness what the board has said in response. And I said what they've done is standard industry practice. Is it?
No, I think as Mr. Mohandas Pai said this morning, and it has been reported on the web, that there is not one other case in the history of corporate India in the last 50 years where a departing CFO was paid 30 months of severance pay. So it's not that common.
So let's take the example of Mohandas Pai, who was CFO at one stage,
yes,
who when he finally left Infosys, left with a degree of unhappiness that he'd not been considered for the job of CEO because he was not one of the founders. Yet there was never any suggestion that he needed to be paid off or that he would compromise Infosys. No, he left with the company's best interests at heart.
Yes, we didn't pay him any severance pay. When Mr. Balakrishnan left, we didn't pay any severance pay. When Mr. B.G. Srinivas was on the board left, we didn't pay any severance pay. When Mr. Ashok Vemuri who was on the board left, we didn't pay any severance pay. So therefore, there is a little bit of consternation as to why such a huge severance pay was paid.
But that's not the only issue, right? It's not just about one CFO and how much he was paid. Your concerns run deeper.
There was a former legal counsel who was paid 12 months severance pay. That again created a little bit of consternation. Overall, the issue is whether the Remuneration and Nominations Committee and the board is actually spending adequate time on these issues? Are they asking questions like, is this what happens normally in India? Or what will the world think of us if we pay such huge sums? Third, are we going to pay such huge sums to future key people that leave the company? What is the financial implications on the company, financial liabilities for the company, etc. There are lots of questions that need to be asked before you come to a conclusion to change the policy from one of 3 months severance to such a large sum.
To 30 months severance.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Yeah. One suggestion has been that the board of Infosys, because it's now a big prestigious thing to be on the board, has generally been quite laid back and hasn't thought as deeply as it should have about the issues. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, I don't know because I'm an outsider. So
yeah, sure.
It is not fair on my part to make any of those statements. All that I would say is, looking at what comes out of the company, looking at the decisions they have taken, my fervent hope is that the board will exercise a higher level of due diligence before coming to conclusions on some of these issues. That's all what I would like to say.
You are, apart from being the founder of Infosys, you're still a large shareholder.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So
yes.
As a shareholder, if not as a founder, what would you like Infosys to do differently now?
Basically, I would say that they need to strengthen the remunerations and nominations committee. They have to prepare a checklist of questions in deciding the remunerations of any incoming key employee, the severance pay for any key employee who is leaving the company. They should look at the reputation of the company in every one of their actions. And at the end of the day, they have to ask a very simple question. Will this decision of ours enhance respect for the company? That's all. The moment you ask the question, I think a lot of these issues will get sorted out.
But that suggests they're not asking the questions at the moment. Is that what you believe?
Well, as I said, I'm not part of the deliberations, so therefore I am not in a position.
No, hang on. You're saying they should do this, but
Yeah.
you wouldn't want them to do this if they're already doing it. I mean, that's self-evident, right?
If they're doing it, then I don't think we would have had a decision of the kind that we have seen. That's all.
Okay. Before I go on to the larger issues of the tech industry and Infosys, let me ask you the sort of uncharitable thing that's being said about you, which is that this is Ratan Tata syndrome, a man who walked away from an empire and said, I don't care, I will concentrate on other things, and now cannot bear to see the company being run without him.
Well,
I'm not sure it's true of Ratan Tata, but that is the term.
I think it's a fair question.
Yeah.
I have been told by several industry experts that in the 150 years of corporate India, we, the founders, were the first group to voluntarily walk out from the company after founding it and nurturing it for 33 years, creating a cash pile of about 30,000 crores, taking the market capitalization to about 200,000 crores, taking the revenue to about $8.7 billion, taking the net income to about $1.8 billion, creating 32 million square feet of office space plus another 7 work in progress. And this is, according to my friends, this is not a mean achievement, and there is no other case where people have walked off from the company. None of us continued on the board of any of these companies.
That's fair.
Yeah.
No, but the suggestion is that you are now having, well, not quite seller's regret, but walker away is regret. That having walked away, seeing the company doing well, you are actually not that happy and you want to interfere and run it.
Well, if we had not seen the kind of things that happened, if I had not received 1,800 emails from employees, from various investors, from the
1,800?
Yeah, 1,800.
1,800 emails is what you've received?
Absolutely. About the severance pay, about some of the other governance issues, I would have had no worry. For example, when Mr. K.V. Kamath was the chairman of the company, there was not a single time when I even called him on any of Infosys issues. There was not a single time that he had to update me on any issues.
All right, so that was N.R. Narayan Murthy there with his take on this controversy. Joining us this evening now is former Infosys CFO, Mr. Mohandas Pai, someone who's also spent 17 years with Infosys. He's shedding some light on the entire boardroom conflict. Thanks very much, Mr. Pai, for speaking to us here on CNN News 18. First up, what would you say is the crux of the entire conflict?
The crux of the problem is the governance in case of certain transaction being paid, 24 crores being paid to a former CFO and a proper explanation not being given. The chairman of the company went before the shareholders and said that particular person had confidential information, he could have joined other companies and therefore we paid him. It's a normal occurrence. It is not a normal occurrence. In the last so many years, 30, 40 years, I've been seeing corporate India, nobody has been paid 30-month severance or 24-month severance. Nobody has been paid 24 crores to go, especially a CFO. And paying a CFO like that is such a dangerous precedent because the audit committee should call the CFO and ask him, what is it secret that he has got? Because all of us signed an NDA agreement. All of us signed an agreement with the employer saying we will not give any data to outsiders, will not give any secrets. It's part of the employment. A separate agreement and severance is not required. What is it that made the board pay? Some analysts have spoken about certain things which I don't want to repeat here. And Murthy also has spoken about it in public. I think that's an issue which the founders raised in 2016 May. No satisfactory explanation has come. And it's obvious that it's been handled very, very badly. And much news is now coming out how it happened, why it happened, which I don't want to talk about. But whatever be the matter, these are governance issues. It's got nothing to do with management, nothing to do with the CEO. It has got to do with the chairman and how he has handled the board.
But then, Mr. Pai, what do you make of the counter-argument coming in? The board did nothing wrong. This is standard operating procedure.
Saying it is a standard operating procedure is totally wrong. This is an Indian company. The CFO is an Indian. His employment is in India. How many CFOs you know have been paid 24, 30 months severance in this country? Please tell me. Search through anything. So that statement is not correct. It's not honest. You can't make the statement. I was a CFO. I got nothing. In fact, they didn't even pay me my variable compensation for 2.5 months, and I had to fight with the then CEO to say, you must pay me, and I gave the money to charity because it's a matter of principle. They didn't pay Bala. They didn't pay many senior people who left. So I think it's totally wrong, and they must come out and say why it has happened. And there are many other issues where personal company property has been used for personal purposes, which the founders had raised earlier. And I think they forced the board to take action on that. So this shows weak corporate governance by the chairman. And I think what Murthy has said about wanting the chairman to step down, I think is totally correct. I think most people support that.
Are we looking at a larger impropriety issue then? Is there a serious lack of transparency that is also a huge problem that you perceive in the company?
There's a lack of transparency, there's a lack of process, the lack of application of mind. There's too much concentration of power. And if you look at the audit committee report on page 84 of the annual report for 2016, nothing is said about the 24 crores that have been paid. Audit committee should have said it's a very large amount, right? It's not an ordinary amount. The nomination and whether the nomination and that remuneration committee also agree to that, they have to agree because it's being paid to the CFO. A CFO, CEO, the CEO, CFO, CEO compensation is done by the compensation committee. It's a very senior people. The CFO is responsible for the financial integrity of the enterprise. So these are questions that you're asking because the reason is if you slip on something, it could be a long slippery slope.
Right.
The company should not slip.
Okay.
The company should be held up to very high standards.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, Mr. Mohandas Pai, for speaking to us here on CNN News 18 at the top of India at 9. But there are larger issues again. It's the old guard versus the board. Whether there are larger issues there as well. That's something that we're going to explore in our conversation with our guest now joining in. Veer Sanghvi, resident commentator, joining us from Bangalore. In fact, he was in conversation with N.R. Narayan Murthy earlier this evening. Veer, thanks very much for being with us on India at 9. We also have MD of GlobalHunt India Private Limited, Mr. Sunil Goel, to give us a perspective from the corporate industry as far as standard operating procedures are concerned and what really is his take on the matter. We also have Harichandan Narakali, tech editor, Forbes India, who is with us with his take on these developments as well. Thanks very much, first of all of you for your time here on CNN News 18. Mr. Goel, if I could begin with you first, just to put things straight, because there are allegations and counter-allegations that have been made. What is your take on the developments? Going by what we've seen, heard, read so far, where do you stand? And when that argument is made that this is standard operating procedure by the board, then how are we to see it?
See, today if you look at, the compensation range for the CEO has been always a buzzword, right? It's not for today, it's been for the, quite some time now. How much should be the compensation and benefits when the leadership of the team is sitting on the, all those organizations? In the past, the debate has been that you always categorize the organizations, one, those who are individual owns, and second, those who are a mid-sized company, and third, which are a public-owned organizations with a large setups.
Okay.
Within those, you always have a public stakes. It means more and more investments from public, from foreign investors, different financial institutions, and etc. So as and when there's a benefit shoots up to for an individual, specific. So they will not talk about if you go and increase that 100 million, benefits for the employee welfare or the compensation benefits. Believe me, there are no questions will be raised.
Okay.
But as and when the benefits comes specific to an individual, because individuals are individuals and they are playing a role in the larger organizations,
right,
which are a public driven organization.
Which is in this case, yes.
Then it becomes a question mark that,
okay,
are you working for driving the organization to a certain level? So benefits, the bonuses has been paid. We have seen these questions raising in the global markets and India market both time and again. But anything which goes beyond a certain standards. So why the questions are raising? Because the figures are not the normal figures. If you go and look at 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 companies or 20 companies.
Right.
So the debate is coming up that is the individual should be benefited this much from this kind of a role, or it should not be benefited this much. So from a compliance perspective, if you look at, so I don't see there's anything wrong from a compliance perspective.
There is nothing wrong,
right?
Is what
but
you're
if
saying.
you look at it from a control, yeah, so compliance perspective, everything is fine. There's a disclosures, the money has been paid and everything is fine. But if you look at from a corporate governance and from an individual accountability and responsibility, when the board says,
right,
the CEO is there and the leadership team is there, they always work towards the progression of the organizations, not for the individual progressions.
Okay, all right.
Now either that comes as a severance packages or anything else.
Okay, all right. In fact, Harchandan, I wanted to get you in on that point of transparency that has now been raised. What have you picked up on that?
Sorry, what is the question for me?
The question is, the issues of transparency that have been raised. Many people are equating, and we've been going through a lot of statements that have been made, a lot of, expert analysis that has been made. Many are equating this kind of compensation that was paid out to hush money. Does the matter get a little more complicated when questions of transparency are raised in this context?
No, we don't know enough. We don't know enough to say anything at this point. I mean, that said, Infosys and its peers, the other Indian IT companies, are among the most transparent companies in this country and probably in the world. I mean, a very simple sort of micro level example, if you look at Infosys' filings, they declare how many H-1B visa holders they have, 14,000 odd at the moment, because it's all in the news. So as to your specific question of a problem with transparency,
because the reason, just to come in once again, the reason why I asked this specific question is because it was raised by Mohandas Pai in that interview to CNN News 18, in which he said specifically on record that there is a problem of transparency. That's something that needs to be addressed. And when we're looking at a question of transparency and you're attaching a name like Infosys to it, that becomes problematic, doesn't it? And that's my larger question, Harichandan.
Fair enough. All I'm saying is, at this point, we shouldn't be jumping the gun and saying, at least, I mean, from Mr. Mohandas Pai to say that it's absolutely fine. But, for us, outside observers to say that is a different matter. All I'm saying is that for us, we need to wait and see for more clarity to come out on, what information, needs to be shared, between the board and investors and so on.
Okay, Mr. Goel, if I could get a view from you now, then what do you think should be, or how should really this be handled in the way in which it is playing out? It is playing out openly, unfortunately. It is making headlines. It is making for discussions like this, not because of any kind of, curiosity, but the fact is that we're talking about Infosys. I mean, one of the giants in the industry. Mr. Goel, how does this play out from this point onwards?
Sure. I think, let me share one of my very, very hands-on experience, as a headhunter, while I've been recruiting companies for various IT industries for India and the global market. Infosys and TCS kind of companies has not been very good paymaster from last 2 decades and 2.5 decades. And believe me, I'm telling you, last 2-3 years before, we used to approach most of the leadership roles in these companies and the company used to offer almost 2 to 3 times salary to those people to make them move from Infosys to other organizations. And we used to fail at 90 to 95% of time, right? And they never used to move on. Money was never an excitement for the people, those who has crossed a certain level in these organizations. I'm talking about not only Infosys, even in TCS, right? And we always used to, vouch and say that developing a certain employee-friendly or employee-intensive culture is not easy, where most of the time you'll find that 50 to 60% of the employees give their 50 to 60% of the whole career to these companies.
Okay.
And if you go and compare their compensation structures from the market, believe me, they're almost half a paid or 1/3 paid.
Right.
In terms of pure salary comparison I'm talking about. Those things have changed. Last couple of years, 2 to 3 years, things have changed. People attachment has gone little away from the organizations, and now it flows from top to bottom. And people now look at that, okay, career growth, stability, will they get the space within the organizations? Those kind of things people have started talking. So as a headhunter, what I have realized and experienced in the past, when we used to have a tough time to break a resource from these organizations at certain level, so these days it's not that difficult. So if you talk to a person, if you give them a cold call and tell them, hey, we are a headhunter, we do so and so, believe me, they come into a discussion. And it becomes much, much easier for us to break them away.
Okay, all right.
Compensation front was never an excitement for them because they used to always value the organizations and wanted to be with the organization because they assumed and they felt it that every day there is something new is happening. They've been felt part of the organization, and that's how the whole organization got built up.
Okay.
So today's scenario got little more, I'll say, it's working more like a professional world or professional organizations where the emotional attachments of the people is getting away because of someone will get benefited high, someone will get benefited low. So there's always it's more of an assumption of a discrimination within the people. It starts coming.
Okay.
That why a finance or a compliance person will get so much of money? Is this everything is right? Is everything is fine at finance end? Is everything is fine at compliance end? So those are the things which starts coming in the people, and maybe when they read the different kind of news outputs, different commentators give their different inputs. So there's a lot of things arises in the people mind, and an employee of the organizations becomes very, very sensitive.
Okay, right. All right. I think that's a good point to end this discussion on, and we're going to leave it there. But Veer, thanks very much. We're looking forward to that full interview on virtuosity that plays out this weekend. Thanks very much for being with us. Mr. Harchandran, thanks very much, and also Mr. Goel, thank you very much for your time here on CNN News 18. This is certainly not the last that we've heard of this issue. It is likely to go on, and CNN News 18 will be tracking that very closely. We'll take a short break, but coming up next,